is the 800th anniversary of the Stigmata. So 1224, and here we are, 2024. And so as I go through to the day, I will often say Francis was doing this in 2015. No, he was not living in 2015. So you'll just have to bear with me because somehow that just comes. So I am delighted to be here today, and I just hope everyone will kind of absorb and imbibe all the wonderful gifts of our Father Francis, that we can go out to the world and share all of that with God's people, just as Francis did. So this morning, we're going to look at some of the events that led up to 1224. So Francis was doing many things. I'm not going to go back into his real early childhood, but let's just begin today with what Pope Francis said of St. Francis in his writings Fratelli Tutti. So this is what Pope Francis said. He described Francis as a person who made listening a way of life. And so this is Pope Francis. St. Francis heard the voice of God. He heard the voice of the poor. He heard the voice of the infirm, and he heard the voice of nature. He made of them a way of life. My desire, that's Pope Francis, is that the seed that St. Francis planted may grow in the hearts of many. And the quote, Francis's profound desire to follow Christ motivated him to conform himself totally to Christ. We, as followers of Francis, desire to conform ourselves to Christ through prayer, silence, and action in meaningful ways. As we try to make listening our way of our lives, we can foster dialogue in our families, with others, and especially with the young. This diagram is going to take you on a little psychological journey with St. Francis and hopefully with yourselves. So I'm going to put this in the context of Carl Jung, who was a psychiatrist really, but he was working in a state hospital. He realized the people there had a lot of spiritual symbolism, especially in their dreams. And so he had become a scientist. And he, came from a family where his father was a Protestant minister, the Reformed Church of Switzerland. His 8 uncles were. So on Sunday afternoon, they had big discussions. He was sick at age 12 and read all his father's books on the early mothers and fathers. He goes to college, quotes all the stuff he remembers reading, gets in trouble because he really didn't cite where he got it from. Amazing man. He was spiritual. So when he turned 37, he felt like he was had sold his soul, let's say, and he wanted to find it again. And so he literally took 2 years off. He had a rich wife, her family supported them. So for 2 years, he just read, wrote, journals, thought about God, thought about life. And what came from that were 8 journals, just like you and I might write. He realized that in those journals was his new theory. So he took painstakingly pains to rewrite those 8 journals into a big red book. So some of you maybe have seen that red book, it's amazing. So what we want to do today is to just kind of look at his theory. And this is what it starts with. The upper, can I go there and point? If I stand here, what? Or not? Well, maybe I won't. Okay, but anyway, you follow it. So that top circle, the persona covering the ego. Our ego is our consciousness. It got you here this morning. You're doing good things for God. So all of us have a strong ego. We want strong ego strength. It helps us survive in our world. But most of us cover that with some type of persona. For Francis, he was kind of had the persona of a playboy. Then he really wanted to be, high in the military. So he, like Jung, would say, we need to let go of our personas. So some of us were teachers. I still might pick up a piece of chalk. It's instinctual. But we have to let go of some of our personas. So Francis then, with his father and the bishop, strips himself of all his clothing and throws his money at his father's feet. He let go of his persona. So then that enabled him to take, I think all of us, on some retreat you might have a memory where you just felt like you went deeper into yourself. You're quiet, many times out there somewhere. So for Francis, because he was in that war with Perugia, he gets put in prison, he had a lot of time to think. My image was that all these men were in some big cement cellar. Whenever he had to go to the bathroom, oh my goodness. So, it was traumatic for Francis, right? So he comes home, he lets go of that persona, and then he drops down into what Jung called the shadow. And that's like when we meet our grungies, when we come in touch with things that we, get all worked up about and things that we worry about, that we can let go of that. And so what Francis did, he kind of projected his shadow onto the lepers. So the lepers were the ones who were kind of evil, stay away. But at some point, he started to go and be with the lepers. And Bill Short, some of you maybe know him as a wonderful Franciscan brother, he said that it wasn't that Francis kissed the leper, it was that the leper kissed Francis. And that was when he realized it was not himself. It was the God in all those lepers that he was seeing. So, if we go down further, then we see what says the anima and animus. Thank you, you are a genius. Okay, so the anima is the feminine energy in all of you men. And the animus is the masculine energy in all of us women. Now, Francis, his anima energy came from his dear mother, Lady Pica, and Claire of Assisi, and Lady Jacobi. So those 3 women kind of carried Francis's feminine quality. they taught him how to be kind, how to be compassionate. So that, and then for us women, sometimes we need to absorb some of that good masculine energy where you could do what you had to do this morning, just put this on. So if our consciousness comes in touch with the collective unconscious, which is all of our energy, if we had a slinky, I gotta find one of those. If we could pull this together, pull it up, all of these qualities, if we could pull them together, would form the self. So it's like all of that gets pulled up in the self. And that is our true self. Jung would say the God within. And that process of going from our ego to our true self, Jung called that the individuation process. And individual means not divided. So when we talk about being an individual, what we're saying is, I am not divided. I am a whole integrated human. So that was the experience of Francis, to become whole, integrated. So spirituality is how we connect with God. When we are whole, W-H-O-L-E, integrated, we are holy. In Leviticus, it says, "Be holy, for I, your God, am holy." And again, in 1 Corinthians, it says, "The temple of God, which you are, is holy." Holiness is being God. Love. God is love to everyone. So that is our call. So our call is to be holy. Our call is to share that holiness, that godness with others, and to reach our own inner wholeness. So hopefully when you leave today, you're going to feel a little wholer, W-H-O-L-E-R, I coined that word. Okay, next please. So after that experience of Francis being in that dungeon, he came home, he was sick, his father was not happy with him, but he would go out and roam around, and that was when he really began to feel sorry, to show charity to those lepers. So in them, Francis could only see Christ. And I've said that about when the leper kissed him, that changed his life. So our challenge is that we today are to seek to live the gospel of Jesus as Francis did, so that our conversion and our turning to Christ may enable us to continue the mission of Jesus, which is love. So Francis and a few of his followers, around 2009, so this is early, they lived in, I looked at all the Italian maps, too bad I didn't put them up here, but Riva Torto is pretty close to Assisi. So he and his few men were living there, and they were working with the lepers, and they would go on preaching tours. So that, trying to spread the word of God, that was so deep in Francis. So then, we think, so all these dates, each book you read, they have a little bit different. But Francis began to have more followers, somewhere around 1212 maybe. He travels to Spain. He walks the El Camino. Our friend Jan just came back from that. So, and the Franciscan monastery there has Francis everywhere. So they remember that Francis came. So when he's back, he thinks, we don't have enough room here at Riva Torto. So he contacts the Benedictines to see if they will let him lease St. Mary of the Angels, what became known as the Portiuncula, the little portion, from the monks of St. Benedict for a basket of fish annually. Now it's so interesting because the Benedictines still contact a number of the women religious Franciscans and ask for their fish. So they've been keeping track. So again, bear with me for these dates because they could be wrong. Do we have any of the Poor Clares here today? Yes, yes, yes. Hi. So would we say 1211 or 1212? That Clare journeyed in the night, Palm Sunday, to join Francis. 1211, 1212. So anyway, one of those days. So many of the books said 1211. So after she stayed for a little while with the Benedictines at San Paulo in the valley near Ostia, which is kind of off to the side of Assisi, and then a short stay with the community of recluses, her sister Agnes joins her, and then finally they get relocated to San Damiano, which was one of the churches Francis rebuilt. And Clare became the abbess for the second order of Franciscans. And Francis wrote a form of life for her and the poor ladies that became known as the Poor Clares. So during the years 1212, 1214, the Crusades were in full force. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't imagine the Crusades were about going to the Muslims and killing them. Poor Francis, he's going, this is terrible. We need to help them convert. They need to hear God's message, the Christian message. They believed in God. So Francis steps out for two possibilities. The first one, they got like over here to the water, and there were such strong winds, they couldn't go any further. So he had to go back home. Then again, in like 1213 or 14, he tries to go the route through Spain. Again, he got so sick, he couldn't go. So this burning desire of Francis to go to the Muslims was very, very deep. And he had heard about people getting slaughtered and all these people dying. But he still wanted to go. So what happens in 1219, two big events. Well, I didn't talk about the Tau, but he did use that Tau that Innocent III encouraged everyone to use that as a sign of conversion. So then Francis says, well, that's good. I'll just always use that with my signature. So then in 1219, Francis starts the lay Franciscans. So we know from Vatican II that other than the men, the priests and brothers, we Franciscan sisters, we Franciscan, what do we call them? Seculars, sorry, are all part of that laity. So we then become the third order. Okay, so come June 2014, Francis takes off in 2019, sorry. He takes off. He is going to go once and for all to the Holy Land, to Muslim territory. So he, this time, stays very close to the edge, comes all the way down, goes, crosses over, and gets to Egypt. And Egypt, in Damietta, is where the 5th crusade was. So Francis is kind of half with them and half not, but then they get slaughtered. So the 5th crusade ends in defeat. However, the Sultan sets what we would say a truce that would begin September 1st and go to September 26th. So almost a whole month. And somehow Francis, though somebody who protects, crosses the enemy line and goes right where the Sultan is. They have wonderful conversations. They become friends. Some writers say that the Sultan really became Christian, but could not acknowledge it for fear his own people would kill him. So that relationship was very, very strong. And I'm emphasizing this because it's going to come back again. Very connected, a deep friendship. So Malik al-Kamil became his friend. So after that experience, and I might just as a little aside, this is taking place around 1219, 1220. By 1333, years later, the Muslims authorized the Franciscans to return to Jerusalem to watch over the Christian holy places. And that was all because of Francis. He led the way for that. Okay, now let's look at our little map here. So if you can start up where the red star is, can you see that? And if the water is blue and the white, he had to come all the way down to the tip. They think maybe Brindisi. And then the 1219 comes around, goes to Rhodes. You see that? Rhodes. Yep, right there. He crosses over and comes to Damietta. And he's right that close to Cairo. And look how close he is to Jerusalem, the Holy Land, Damascus. So he was brave. He was brave. He knew he could, be martyred, but he wanted to do it the worst way. Okay, so let's go. He comes back home. And again, these dates are fluid. They're fluid. So somewhere around 1220, now he was in Egypt 1219. So they think this was kind of close. He comes home. They were having chapters, and then sometimes they'd have bigger chapters, chapter of math. So some of you friars, at the break, you can come up here and explain how it really was. So I'm just kind of taking this from the many books I read. But he comes home and possibly calls a chapter around Pentecost. And what he noticed on the way home, in the town of Bologna, there was a house of studies for his men. How did Francis want to live? So simple, in little huddles, wherever you could find something to rest your head. They have a house of studies. So this disturbed Francis very much, And the men were trying to get a more settled lifestyle. That's how they put it in the history books. So by this time, they think there could have been 3,000 friars. Cardinal Ugolino, who was their kind of advocate, is present. The followers want to be like the other orders. So we know we have the Benedictines, the Augustinians, and the Bernards. So I don't know what their men were called, but St. Bernard's group. So they lived in houses, they went to school. So Francis's people were wanting that. Francis was so disturbed by that. So he realized that he, was not able to influence. He was not an administrator. So what he does is he resigns. Now, people have written about his resignation was probably comparable or maybe more than when Pope Benedict resigned. Oh my gosh, popes lived till they died. So Benedict and Francis had that wisdom to know when it was time for them to let go. So what a gift, what a gift. So Francis resigns as head, and he appoints Brother Peter Quintavalli. Now, I don't know, they just say he died in 6 years. So some of you people in leadership, please do not up and die in 6 years. So we don't know what he died from. So as a result, then, Francis was able to appoint Elias. Now, Brother Elias of Assisi was the new vicar. He served from 1221 till 1227. So at this time, what could Francis do? The men were, 3,000, maybe more. They're all spread out. He couldn't know what was going on. So Francis says, I'm out of here. I'll let Brother Elias lead. So Francis then takes Brother Angelo and also Brother Leo and Caesar of Spire, and all of these people were kind of more educated and good writers. And so they leave to try to rewrite the rule, because see, the brothers are all upset with it. So they revise and produce the rule of 1223. So it's amazing when we think that by this time, Francis is at Forte Colombo, a little bit south of Assisi. He has malaria outbreaks, fevers. He has eye disease. They think he could have gotten all of that when he went over to the east. So he is in kind of bad shape himself at this point. So they're writing that rule. They do get out once in a while. So they just happen to be going through Greccio. It was near Christmas. And so Francis, meditating on the life of Christ, thought, what a beautiful feast to celebrate the incarnation. The incarnation. And he was able to have the live crib. So that live crib, as we put out our creches at Christmas, originated by St. Francis. So Francis is definitely trying to live a more solitary life. I'll tell you only one real quick story. I had to bring a prop. Is this not the cutest little lamb? They're walking along. There's a field, all these goats, and one little lamb in their midst. Now, of course, these are stories. Francis, so disturbed, thought, oh my gosh, that poor little sheep. So he goes